Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Stress Performance with Micro Tesorio. Today, you are listening using your computer speaker system by default, and you'll have the opportunity to submit questions to Michael by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end. Michael is driven to optimise the health and well-being of individuals by empowering them to consider their whole self, focusing on both their physical and mental well-being. He has consulted to elite sporting teams such as the Sydney Swans AFL, New South Wales Warriors Rugby Union, as well as elite level athletes, and holds a degree in exercise science, a master's in nutrition and dietetics, as well as an MBA. Michael couples the expertise with over 15 years of experience in the corporate world in senior positions, so he fully understands the demands and stresses of working in a corporate environment and trying to balance the competing demands of work and personal life. Michael is a highly entertaining and engaging speaker who will ensure the audience not only enjoys the session, but walk away with practical and powerful tools to improve their health and well-being. I will now hand this over to Michael.
All right, thanks very much for that. And welcome everyone, and thanks for having me here today. I wanted to start off the presentation with a quote, and this is a quote that really resonated with me, and it is, "Burnout is not the price you have to pay for success." And that's by Ariana Huffington, who's at the Huffington Post. And I think it's quite pertinent, because I think in today's day and age, we view the extreme hard work that we all do and the stress that goes with it almost as a badge of honour. And that's something that really needs to stop. I would consider myself pretty much a recovering workaholic who learnt the hard way the impact that stress can have on both your physical and mental health. Now, stress performance might seem like a bit of a strange name for the presentation, but after today's session, you'll walk away with some simple and really practical tips that you can use straight away to manage your stress. But also, we'll talk about stress in a little bit more detail, in the sense that it's not always a bad thing. I think stress gets victimized and demonized, and stress within boundaries can actually be a fairly positive thing. Sorry, right, there we go. So I'll put this picture up here. I'll put this picture here just to illustrate the fact that in today's day and age, it really is information overload. Everywhere we go, you're bombarded by health information, and it can be pretty difficult to understand what you need to believe, because quite often it's both conflicting and confusing. If you look one try bad for you, say it's good, so hooray for that. Then you hear you shouldn't be drinking alcohol in moderation. Then you hear fat is bad, fat is good, carbs are good, carbs are bad. And it changes all the time. So it can be quite difficult to know where to stand. So my goal of this talk today is really just to cut through all the fog and give you clarity and some really clear actionable tips. Now, if I could see everyone, I would say hands up who thinks stress is a bad thing. Chances are a lot of you would put your hand up. Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that nearly 80% of Australians said that stress had a negative impact upon their physical or mental health. Now, stress is inevitable. So unless you want to cut yourself off from the world, you're not going to avoid it. And even if you did go try and cut yourself off, there's stress there no matter what you do. But what really is important is your perception to stress. And in short, perception matters. If you view stress as a negative thing, it's more likely to have a negative impact upon you. And this is actually backed up by science. So there's a paper here I'm going to share with you, and this is as deep and technical as we go into scientific papers, but it's a little bit on the older side. So it's from 2012. But it did have over 28,000 subjects, so that's a lot. What they did was they tracked these people over a period of time, and also looked at their health associated with that stress. And what they found was that the perceptions of stress by the people really made a massive difference to their health outcomes, to the point where those who viewed stress as a negative thing had actually a 43% greater risk of mortality. So let that sink in. 43% greater risk of mortality than those who didn't have as much stress. And that was irrespective of the stress level. So if you had two people, One could be under a high level of stress, but they viewed it more positively. Someone was under a lower level of stress, but viewed it as a negative, in a negative way. They actually had a greater risk of mortality. And the authors was having a stress is enhancing versus stress is a debilitating mindset. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but this is known as the human performance curve. Now, when you put it on the vertical axis, you've got performance, and on the horizontal axis, you've got stress. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that when you're in the very far left of the curve, where you've got very low stress, it's actually pretty boring. There's not a great deal happening from a performance perspective. Excuse me. What you do see, though, is as you serve, you start getting a bit more stress. You start seeing that exponential improvement in your performance. And then you reach the middle of the curve, which is very much your sweet spot there. So that's when you're feeling energized and focused. And if you're ever in that position when you're under a bit of stress at work, as an example for you, and you're just feeling like you're in the zone, chances are that's where you are, because a little bit of stress actually does drive the level of performance. And if you look at it from an athlete perspective, if an athlete's right down the far left of the curve, not doing any exercise or any training, they're not going to improve or perform very much. They start doing a little bit of training, and even if you go to the gym or you do a run or anything like that, you put your body under a degree of stress. And what you're enabling your body to do is to adapt to that stress and get fitter or stronger. Where the problem lies is when you start moving towards the right-hand side of the curve into that distress. And that is either you're under stress at an extreme level and or a chronic level. So ideally, what we want to do is really trying to deviate between the middle of the curve when we need to perform and back down to that calm state. So that's really we're going to get the best of both worlds of really optimizing your performance. But this is just to signify, I said in the beginning that stress is not always a bad thing. And this is what I'm trying to demonstrate with this slide, is that bit of stress, area performance. So we're going to take a little bit of a trip back to school, back to biology lessons, which for me was quite a while ago. We're going to talk about stress in the sense of the impact it has on your nervous system. So there's a component of the nervous system called your autonomic nervous system. Now that controls all the things we do normally during the day, like breathing, our heart rate, all those sorts of things. Now there are two components of the autonomic nervous system. There's a sympathetic component and the parasympathetic component. Now the sympathetic component, you may have heard of it as fight or flight. So that is, you've heard that, I'm sure we've all heard that analogy of the caveman and the woolly mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger comes along. This is really what happens with the sympathetic nervous system. This is when you're in danger. So what happens physiologically is that your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your breathing becomes more rapid and shallower. You also get a big release of energy into your bloodstream, and you get a release of stress hormones, epinephrine and cortisol. So cortisol, you may have heard of before as a main hormone that's released in response to stress. Interestingly though, what also happens is whilst your body's gearing up, releasing energy, ready to either fight or flight, it's starting to down-regulate things that are not going to be needed in this time. So if you imagine that caveman is ready to fight off the saber-toothed tiger, it doesn't need its digestion as much. Reproductive system is not as important. So your body down-regulates those systems because it needs to concentrate wholly and solely on that fight for survival right now. The other side of it is the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system, the other way to think of that is rest and digest. So that's very much when you're in more of a relaxed state. So your heart rate tends to be lower, excuse me, blood pressure tends to be lower. Things like digestion tend to be working at a much higher rate because your body's in that more of a relaxed state. And your body is alternating between both of these autonomic and sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system depending on what's going on. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is that when the nerve that regulates the parasympathetic nervous system is the 10th cranial nerve, which is called the vagus nerve. Now, there's some relevance to that, which we're going into in a bit more detail in a moment. But the vagus nerve innervates, among other things, your diaphragm and your gut. So really, what I want you to take from this is that autonomic nervous system, the two systems, which is your fight or flight or your rest and digest. So let's put this together and give you a practical example. So if anyone is interested in learning more about stress and the impact that it can have on your body, there's a really, really good book I'd recommend. Now, the name is a bit weird. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and it's by an author called Robert Sapolsky. So if you are interested in learning more about the nervous system and the effect that it has on your body, definitely recommend that book. So let's give you an analogy. So beautiful looking zebra here, hanging out in the savannah, is feeling pretty chilled out, pretty relaxed. He's alert. So on that performance curve, he's not in the bored state. He's just in that calm state. So he's eating a bit of grass, looking around. He's predominantly in a parasympathetic stage right now, because being sympathetic or being very high energy or that stressed out state takes up too much physical and mental energy. He's looking around, his heart rate's probably pretty low, blood pressure's pretty low, feeling pretty good about life. Inevitably, the lion comes along. So this is fight or flight time. This is the time where if he doesn't get away from the lion, he's going to become lunch. So what the body does is automatically clicks into gear the sympathetic nervous system. So his heart rate goes up, his blood pressure goes up, and he starts sprinting away. At this time, all those things we spoke about before that aren't necessary for him to survive, like his digestion, like his immune system, they get down-regulated. Now, the lion is unsuccessful this day, so the zebra gets away. Now, where the zebra is different to us humans is that the zebra is not going to dwell on what's just happened. So it's going to down-regulate its sympathetic nervous system and go back to more of that parasympathetic state. So again, looking around, obviously aware of what's going on, but heart rate comes back down, blood pressure comes back down, and it's not dwelling on what just happened. So we think about how we as humans relate to our normal day. So you go to sleep and your alarm goes off in the morning, and it's probably some hideous sound that your alarm makes on your mobile phone, automatically wakes you up in quite a stressed and alert state. First thing we do, all of us pretty much, grab our mobile phone and start checking emails. Then you start looking, you start getting into that work mode. Again, you're getting that stressed out response. You've got to get up, you're running late, you might have to get your kids ready for work, you're racing to a meeting, you might get into some road rage, who knows what happens. But what is happening is that your body is having all these perceived threat or perceived stress. So you're ending up more and more into this sympathetic state. So as opposed to the zebra, which manages to alternate back down to the parasympathetic, we end up in this highly sympathetic state the whole time. Now, if we're living like we saw on that human performance curve, on the right-hand side of the curve, where we're constantly stressed and facing external pressures, that can actually have some pretty significant impacts on us from a physical and mental health perspective. And I guess the analogy I would give you is who drives around all day with their foot flat to the floor, redlining their car? Of course, we're not going to do that. And people would say, why would you do that? You're going to wear out your engine, you're going to wear out your car. When we're constantly under that stress state, that's effectively what we're doing. We're redlining our bodies the whole time in that highly sympathetic, stressed out state. So here's where it gets a little depressing. So what are the effects of chronic stress? So this is not you have a stressful situation and it comes back down. We're talking about living in that chronically stressed state. So it's got mental health implications, both from an anxiety and depression perspective. So if you imagine, it's like if you had the feeling of a lion chasing you all day, it's going to start grinding, wearing down on you pretty badly from a mental health perspective. Digestive issues. So I said before that when you're in that sympathetic state, your digestion is not something that's important for imminent survival. So you tend to downregulate digestion, and you tend to find that people who have a highly stressed state can have digestive issues. Reproductive system. I'm sure we've all heard of couples who have tried to get pregnant, tend to view it in quite a stressful, anxious state. As soon as they start relaxing and going with it, miraculously you tend to see the lady get pregnant. So this is again getting back to the fact that reproductive system, if you're being chased by that metaphorical lion, it's not important right now. So that's something to think about there. Again, same thing for your immune system. That's not imminently important right now. So invariably, when you hear about people who are under chronic stress, what happens? They get sick. They're a lot more susceptible to things like colds. And that's because, again, your body's regulating down your immune system in response to that extreme stress. We've all probably heard about people who are having cardiovascular issues if they're under chronic amounts of stress. So HA stands for heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, and also being under that stress has implications for your blood sugar levels as well. So there is a link between chronic stress and things like diabetes. And again, low libido is another impact of chronic stress. Just to recap where we are right now and what we've actually gone through. So remember, your perception of stress really matters. We talked about that study where if you view stress in a debilitating way, that actually can have health consequences for you. So your perception matters. However, moderate amounts of intermittent stress actually lead to superior performance. So it's not about trying to avoid stress the whole time. It's about cycling between the optimal performance and then back down to that calm state. And we just went through the fact that chronic sympathetic activation can lead to health problems, both physical and mental. So I've told you all that up until now, but what can you do? So this is where we're going to go through some simple practical tips that you can implement straight away that can actually help with your stress management. So when we look at stress, look at two things you can do in response to your acute stress, and then things that you can do in response to your chronic stress. Just going to go over some very, very simple things. So if anyone can remember, the vagus nerve was the 10th cranial nerve. And I said that innervates things like the diaphragm. And that's what can actually, stimulation of the vagus nerve can actually induce that more parasympathetic state. So if you find yourself in an acutely stressful situation, maybe you've got a presentation at work, maybe you had just had an uncomfortable or not a nice interaction with someone, this is a technique that you can use, and it's called box breathing. Now, remember I said that when you're in a stressed situation, your breathing tends to become more rapid and more short. This is simply stimulating your vagus nerve through your breathing. So what you do with box breathing is quite simple. So I can't see if you're going to do this, but I want you all to close your eyes. Now, what we're going to do is, thinking about a box has got 4 equal sides. We're going to do a breathe in for the count of 4. You're going to hold for the count of 4, exhale for the count of 4, and then hold for the count of 4 again. So we're going to run through a couple of times just to give you a sense as to what it's like. So closing your eyes, big deep breath in for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What you find when you do that, if you're in that stressful state, it will actually, as I said, stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system and help to relax you and calm you down. Really simple thing that you can do any time of the day. in terms of chronic stress, I'm going to run through 2 quick things that you can do. Now, the first one is known as reframing. Now, this is something that takes a little bit of practice and something that will come to you over a period of time. And what you're basically trying to do is when you're faced with a stressful situation, you take note of your current negative thoughts and you challenge those thoughts. Is there another way I can view this situation? And you try and replace those thoughts with more positive ones, or a way that you can view this situation potentially as a learning experience. So I'll give you a specific example about how to do this. So let's say that you have been asked to do a presentation in front of your board or in front of your boss or a group of managers. So you might naturally find this to be quite stressful, and you might think to yourself, okay, what if I stand up in front of these people? What if I say the wrong thing? What if they think they don't know what I'm doing? That can obviously lead to exacerbating that level of stress that you're facing. So the way you might reframe this is you might say, okay, I'm doing this presentation. Do you know what? It might be stressful, but stressful in a good way that actually encourages me to perform better. It's actually a really good opportunity for me to stand up in front of these people and actually demonstrate to them what I know. So again, it's not something that will come overnight, but again, thinking about that study and how having that stress is debilitating mindset can actually have health consequences, trying to reframe your approach to stress can be a good long-term solution. Now, I'm sure you all knew it was going to come, but meditation is the other thing. Now, when you ask people whether to try meditation, you've got some people who are absolute diehard fans of it, and they say, you know what, absolutely best thing I've ever done. And other people who say, you know what, meditation's not for me. I actually had someone I was working with, well, I'm still working with them now. I started working with them about 3 or 4 weeks ago. They're under quite a chronically stressful situation at the moment because of COVID. It's having an impact upon their work. Now, they said to me, specifically, she said, I'm not a meditation girl. So I said, all right, no worries. Working over a few weeks, challenged her with that, and she's now a total convert. Now, my own personal experience of meditation, originally I thought, okay, meditation is sitting on mountaintops with Buddhist monks in the cross-legged pose chanting. Not really my thing that I would want to approach, but certainly I've been meditating every day now for just 10 minutes. And to me, I found it to be an absolute and total game changer. So my challenge to you is, although you may not think meditation is for you, just give it a go. And the number one thing that people say is the reason why they get turned off meditation is because their mind starts to wander. And you know what? We're human beings. Our mind is meant to wander. We're meant to think about things. So that's totally normal. So don't let that be something that discourages you from actually trying meditation. There are lots of different apps that you can use. Personally, I use one called Calm, but there's one called Headspace. There's a lot of different apps. So if you're someone who does face stress, and let's be honest, we all face stress throughout our day, I would really encourage you just to give it a try, even just for 5 minutes. You can do something called a body scan when you're doing your meditation, or even just deep breathing. So again, if you're interested to learn about this, and the technique that I use personally is one by a lady called Emily Fletcher, who wrote a book called the Ziva Technique. Now, this is something that just really resonated with me. So that's your homework to give that a go. Also want to talk a little bit more about the physical side of stress. Now, Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut. Now, there's increasing research to talk about the gut-brain axis, or the gut-brain connection. And what has been found that if you have poor gut health, it actually leads to poor mental health. Now, I know that might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but there's more and more evidence to show that having good gut health can actually lead to good mental health. Now, just give you a bit of an indication, the Gut Foundation reported that up to 11 million Australians suffer from some form of gut issue, be that constipation, diarrhea, bloating, or gas. So the vast bulk of us actually do have less than optimal gut health. So I'm going to give you 3 really simple things that you can do to improve your gut health. I'm going to just give you top line because this is, to be honest, a whole talk in itself around how to optimize your gut health. Number 1 is to avoid vegetable oils. Now, when I'm talking about vegetable oils, I'm talking about things like safflower oil and sunflower oil, or the vegetable oils that you buy from your supermarket. It can actually lead to distress within your stomach, lead to an inflammatory response. So what should you be using? Good old virgin olive oil. So cold pressed olive oil is a great one to go for. When you cook with the vegetable oils, it actually changes when you heat them up. It changes the chemical structure of the oils that can actually, as I said, have implications for your gut and your gut health. So throw out all those oils and get yourself a really good quality olive oil. Number 2 is, unfortunately, sorry to say, but limit sugar intake. Now, why is this? So within your gut, you've got the microbiome, which is a collection of all the bacteria that lives in your gut. You've got good bacteria and bad bacteria. When they're out of balance, it's called dysbiosis. Now, when you have sugar, that's actually the food or the nutrients that these bad bacteria love to feast on. So when you're having a lot of sugar, that could actually lead to a build-up of these bad bacteria in your gut. So a little bit of sugar is okay. I like to say everything in moderation, including moderation, but sugar, don't go too crazy on the sugar. And the last thing is take a probiotic. So pretty much everybody should be taking a probiotic. I take one every day. So definitely encourage you to have a think about that one, because again, think about from the sense that good gut health nurtures good mental health as well. And one interesting fact for you is that 70 to 75% of your immune system resides in your gut. So again, if you're someone who tends to be susceptible to illnesses, gut health could be something that could be actually impacting upon your immune system. So I'm so good at sleeping, I can do it with my eyes closed. Now, no talk about stress really, or stress management would be complete without talking about sleep and the impact that I can actually have. So I'm giving you just some very, very simple tips to think about from a sleep perspective, because what you find is that when you don't have enough sleep, that's when it can really impact your ability to deal with stress and things that happen. Things always seem a little bit worse when you haven't had a good night's sleep. So you should really be aiming for 7 to 9 hours of sleep in every 24-hour period. That can deviate a little bit between people, but 7 to 9 hours is really the sweet spot. You've probably heard this one before, but you should be looking at cutting screen time an absolute minimum of 30 minutes before bedtime, if not longer. And the reason why is that your computer or your phone emits blue light. Now, what blue light does is actually causes a dysregulation of your sleep-wake cycle. So you really want to be either avoiding, if you are looking at a computer or your phone, switch it on to night mode. And what this actually does is decreases the amount of blue light that's actually coming from your screen. The other thing you can get are these, if you can see them, they're blue light blocking glasses. So you can actually buy these from any store. And again, you can wear them as a way of actually cutting down on the amount of blue light that's being absorbed. Number 1 rule, don't have your phone beside you when you're going to bed. Keep it out of the room. If you hear the beeps, if you hear the vibrations, it will impact upon your quality of sleep. And at the end of the day, the world's not going to stop turning if you don't have your phone right at your hand. And also discourages you from waking up first thing in the morning and actually grabbing your phone and looking at it and getting into that sympathetic cycle of looking at your emails. If you are finding it hard to relax to get to sleep, try that box breathing. We went through the exercise before. So again, the count of 4 in, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and holding for 4. Now, melatonin supplements within Australia. It's a natural hormone that your body releases. You can actually get melatonin supplements if you see a doctor, and that's maybe something that they could prescribe for you. So if you are having trouble sleeping, maybe that's something you could think about doing and seeing your doctor and seeing if they'll give you a script for melatonin. And the last thing there is really, how do you know you're sleeping unless you quantify it? So I wear a Fitbit. I'm a little bit of a data geek in that sense, is that I love analysing your sleep, and it actually gives you a sleep score. So you can start to actually get a bit of a sense as to what are the sort of things that are impacting upon your sleep. You can have a look at the amount of deep sleep and REM sleep and light sleep that you're getting. So that's just something to think about from a sleep perspective. Now, I've gone through all this relatively quickly. We've only got limited time. If you wanted to know more, I do weekly health hack on LinkedIn, and that's just a variety of subjects each week that I post up on LinkedIn. I do a number of health and wellbeing workshops. So if you enjoyed this, I do around stress in more detail, or around nutrition, exercise, and those sorts of things. So if you wanted to contact me directly, that's my email there up on the screen. But I hope you've enjoyed the talk, and I'm certainly open to any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Michael. This was a very interesting presentation. So thank you for taking the time to present this to our members.
No problems at all.
Now, there doesn't appear to be any questions. However, as Michael just mentioned, if you would like to contact him after the presentation, you can do so with sending him an email with the email address that's on your screen. I will include this email address as part of the email you will receive with a copy of today's recording. So on behalf of Michael and APPA, I'd like to thank all our participants for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. And thank you once again, Michael.
No problems at all. Thank you very much.